Okay, so we're doing this again. We're gonna build upon yesterday. Um, right there is yesterday's. Right in there. Should be a box there. I'm gonna put a box there. If there's not a box there, I'm sorry. I just look like a weirdo doing this with my fingers. Um, we're gonna build on. See, you're playing more games. Um, I'm gonna keep trying to merge finance and gaming. Gaming gab, shall we say. Got my notes here. Did my studying this morning, continuing to grind for my CFA. Ugh, can't believe I just said grind. Gross. Um, and I got my note cards here too. So yeah, I'm not doing this all top of head. Um, some of the stuff that I go off on tangents are pre stuff I've already learned. But a lot of the stuff that I'm talking about is stuff that I'm in fact trying to solidify in my own brain. So the best way to get somebody to learn something is to have them teach somebody else. It really makes you formulate and be able to articulate in your own words. Um, it's a lot different than regurgitating and just rereading something and memorizing the wording of it, but not actually understanding it. You want to build up that knowledge to where you can go on a, gaming gab here and even with your mind focused on something else, being able to keep coming back to that topic and truly trying to articulate in a way that others might understand. Um, but we're gonna get a little clicky, a little clickbaity here. Talk about Bitcoin. Talk about why it's involved with money. Why nobody is gonna be able to explain to me what it really is at its core. I mean, to the algorithmic level, meaning exactly what is it going on. Um, and what you learn is that the technology itself is nothing new, but the way it's arranged and done is new. But again, nobody's. If you own Bitcoin and you can talk about it at the program level and understand the original white paper that Satoshi wrote, then good on you. Way to go. You researched your asset. I mean, honestly, that's all you should do. You should be researching your assets um, and know what you own. Peter Lynch, hashtag. Um, but yeah, coming back to Bitcoin, because we were talking about money, we're talking about gold, we're talking about playing some games and doing a little crossover here event. So that way we build up a consistency on what this series is going to be. So that way it looks like there's actually things going on instead of me just talking in the corner here. Um, but let's get back to Bitcoin here, right? So let's say you own Bitcoin. The pitch for Bitcoin has been that since we know now that money is really just the supply of money out there being controlled by the government, they're able to print money essentially, and that will increase the supply. Now that's a super duper duper simplified version of what's actually going on, um, because there are just a lot of factors um, that go into play when you're trying to determine um, the actual supply of money. Um, and so, getting back to the whole point, right? So, Bitcoin has been this asset that has been deemed useful because it has a fixed set of supply that only so many bitcoins will come out. Meanwhile, we were just saying how the government can print money knowing that it's not backed by gold anymore. Sweet, sweet gold. See you later. Um, Not just because the U.S. doesn't have their money backed by gold anymore does not mean that other nations do not have gold, or in fact that the U.S. doesn't in fact have gold. Um, it's just saying that the currency itself does not have a ratio to a reserve amount in the bank, um, which kind of brings me back to Bitcoin. And so the proponents of Bitcoin say that it is a controlled amount of supply and that only so many Bitcoin will exist. And so therefore, that's one reason why it's better than dollars. And fair play, that makes sense. I don't know if I would rather have um, the governments right now in charge of the money supply. Um, but when you talk about what we used to have, right? So we used to have the gold standard, where a dollar was backed by a physical real asset of gold. Um, that seemed to make sense in terms of what the original use for money was a way to transact your gold that was being held. Um, so we haven't discussed yet the fact that back in the times of Edward Kensington here in Assassin's Creed, when everyone's trying to get gold, um, the only way they can increase their money supply, so their money, right, their currency is gold and coins, and they've treasure, um, is what I just did right there. Is they gotta take it, they gotta go find it, steal it, plunder, matey. Um, Otherwise, it's fixed, and they don't have the ability to just produce gold out of thin air. Um, and so I bring this all up because to me, it doesn't address the issue then that Bitcoin um, presents, and that it doesn't have a physical asset tied to it. So this is kind of where I'm getting a little speculative. And sorry if you tune out, but I struggle with Bitcoin because it's something to me that more closely resembles the tulip mania that we discussed earlier. Because at the end of the day, what happens if there, and this has always been kind of my issue with Bitcoin, is what happens if there's a Bitcoin 2.0? Meaning, what if somebody creates a better version of Bitcoin that's more efficient, that can transact more? Because if you know anything about Bitcoin, which if you are listening at this point, I'm assuming you own Bitcoin. Um, but the issue with Bitcoin in general that they've found is that there isn't the ability to transact nearly enough transactions on the network that would be needed to restructure the money network. So I think from what I've heard, it's something like, and maybe this has changed since then, but it was some 500,000 esque transactions. And so, whatever it is, it's nowhere near the amount that is required to match the transactions of the credit and debit cards that are millions and millions a day. So, with that being said, there's that obvious flaw of Bitcoin where the network isn't just able to transact, which I think is why you've seen some of these other uh, more prevalent coins start to come and emerge. Um, and Ethereum, by the way, is not the same at all. So if you don't know that and you own Ethereum, then go back and learn. Um, but one of the reasons why Elon Musk um, talks about Dogecoin was that Doge was actually at the time a fairly cheap and effective network to transact a ton. So it did what Bitcoin couldn't. So Bitcoin could then be said was a store of value, or I'm sorry, a store of wealth. So it was the appreciator. But then, in order to transact, um, you needed a network that could handle just way, way more transactions a day. And so that's why something like Dogecoin could have come along and been fine. Um, but there are other, I think Solana is a similar, cheaper network. I'm not super into crypto at the moment. I just, again, I actually think right now, more than anything, gold has shown that it is. Oh, hello, sir. That's my dog. He's currently getting a drink of water. Um, but yeah, let's bring this back, right? So we're talking about Bitcoin, we're talking about gold, we're talking about dollar. So if you're owning Bitcoin, right? We love that. We love that fixed amount. But let me pitch you then on gold here for a quick sec. So one of the best things about a currency is that you do not want it to be counterfeitable. I don't know if that's a word. You don't want to be able to counterfeit it. You want to be able to have something that, like the dollar, where you can have watermarks and very intricate designs. Um, they're very difficult to replicate. Um, but you look at something like gold, and until we find an asteroid or some planet that is just coated with gold, we essentially have a fixed amount here on Earth. Now, whether it's been found or not is up for debate. But the debate is not on whether gold is a fixed amount. I mean, gold's not grown in the ground. All right, so we know that. We know gold's not grown in the ground. We also know it's not easy to counterfeit because any jeweler, guy from a jewelry store that owns it, has the tester, the gold tester. And at this point, they're not that expensive. So you can pretty much test and figure out if gold's good or not. So there you go. So there's a little pitch from me for gold because you like the fact that there's only a fixed amount. But let me also tell you, remember yesterday, gold has historically been the most used currency in the history of man. So, keep that in mind. All right, so gold's kind of like the OG Bitcoin, if you don't know. I gotta make room for my dog. Yeah, he's needs to get. You good? You interested in this Bitcoin talk? Probably. Probably. But there you go. It's fixed. We like fixed. We like the amount of the currency supply to just not be a weapon of politicians and governments to be able to change the value of our bank and to change our net worth. I and so I get it. If you own Bitcoin, I get it. I get the proposition. But you gotta know. You gotta know. You gotta know exactly what the differences are between the dollar, gold, and the one thing that I haven't really shown much love to is probably the dollar. And that's because we've been spending more and creating more dollars than any other time in history. So what that can tell you is, I mean, anything that has a supply that just massively increases, um, the value of it's going to go down. I mean, just think about it. So we're talking about money. So the government created more and more and more and more and more money. So the value of that money is going to go down. It's just natural. It's physics. It's law. Because let's think about any other thing. Let's think about let's think about milkshakes. Let's think about crabs. All right. If all of a sudden we had a 10x supply of crabs into the market, and every restaurant in town was selling $1 crab, the value of crab is going to go down because everyone's got it. Everyone has access to it, and it's going to just naturally, because there's only so much demand that can be out there for anything until you start building up excess. And you're like, Jordan, what do you mean? Like, there can only be so much demand. Well, there could only be so much amount of money that can be used and spent and utilized effectively before people just start hoarding it. Because why not? I mean, if you have so much of it and the value of it is so little, then what's the point of just constantly going out and trying to spend more and more of it if you know you're always going to be able to spend more of it? So you get to this point where it's not going to increase the output or productivity or whatever measure you want. At some point, money is just not going to buy yourselves more. I mean, if everyone's driving around with a Lamborghini and a mansion, then at some point, there's going to be a satiation. So there's only going to be a X amount of money that will satiate X amount of demand at any given time. And so I don't necessarily know where I was going with that, but to say that the dollar is what currently lots of nations utilize as their reserve currency. And so they back their dollar to our dollar. So like I was mentioning the gold standard before and how we used to have gold in a vault. Um, Now we have nations that will tie their currency to a ratio of whatever to our dollar. And that's really good for us as a nation because it creates, again, demand for that money supply that we are so desperately um, creating. Just like I'm desperately trying to focus and kill this guy, but I guess I'm struggling. Um, yeah, so if other nations have to get our currency and use it as a reserve for their own currency, then that creates a good demand, and you'll find that there's no better demand than for what our government bonds get in terms of if you're comparing to other nations. Um, and so, with that being said, we currently have a situation where our currency does have a lot of value relative to other currencies, but it still does not negate the effects of inflation. And so we say all this because at the end of the day, currency has to have the ability to be readily available. No, readily available, readily accepted. Struggling. And so what happens in the situation where other countries decide they don't want their underlying reserve currency to continue to get deflated? And they have to adjust their currency based upon it because their currency's tied to it. So what happens if we get a middle finger from other nations and we lose reserve currency status, essentially that just reduces tons and tons of demand for the dollar. And that's also not good because we want to have the ability to use our dollar all over. And so it's the issue with all things currency related is we have to make sure that the currency you have is readily accepted and highly valued at the time you need it. And if not, that's tough. That's really, really, really tough. If you've got, this is why people say things like you got to diversify, and where is this? You got to diversify, and that's with money too. They talk about owning some gold, which, remember, historically speaking, gold. What is it, bud? That's my other dog. You need to go outside. All right, we're gonna pause here. Spin drip break. Sponsored. Delicioso. All right, come on. I was in the floor. Now he's gonna probably interrupt me in another 2 seconds. Okay, so lost my train of thought. We'll get it back. But yeah, readily accepted currency. Why you need to diversify? Why you need to think about this stuff? Because we talked about inflation is eating that dollar up. And all your money, we already decided, all you people out there. I just saw a clip of a streamer on Kick who accidentally showed his bank account. Bro was chilling with $1 million in some regional bank. And I don't know if he knows. I mean, unless he's about to spend that all, which knowing these guys, they just blow money. Um, but that $1 million, if he had that, yielding anything. Hopefully, he has it yielding something. But I can't imagine it just chilling in that bank because it wasn't in anything. I think some banks will have certain amounts where if you have over, they'll give you an incentive and they'll give you some yield. But man, he better be getting yield on that. Because even, if he's got anyone that of knowledge that's telling him money advice, they're probably able to get him close to 5% risk free with treasury rates these days. So 5% on $1 million, $50,000 in a year, doing nothing. That's the average. I don't know what the average income is right now, but that's got to be close. Just on a riskless holding of his $1 million. Like the dude made it. Like the dude has a average income just from his cash going out and getting friends. That's it. Every year it's going to go up because if you have not heard of compound interest, then let me enlighten you. Because year one with his million, okay, he's got the million. Now let's go to year two. So he's got his extra 50,000. So he's got $1,050,000. Year three, he's going to get that same 5%, but now it's going to be on that $1,050,000. So he's going to get more than 50,000. He's going to get 50,000 and I don't know, 50,000, like 51,000. I don't know. I'm doing this roughly off my head. But as you can see how it starts to build upon itself. So every year then you're going to be getting that 5% interest rate or whatever that interest rate is. You're going to get that on that new amount that has all of those previous interests already stacked in. So you're going to be getting the same interest but on a bigger pile each year. And so that dude could just Dude could chill. Assuming he's probably pretty popular. He's probably getting paid well. Probably has monthly cash flow on top of that. I mean, boy could be getting himself set up for life, even if this streaming ended tomorrow. He could be good and good enough to be able to then find that next thing. Yeah, I mean, send me over to any streamer that needs to get learned. But, anyways, this is getting a little long winded. I don't even know if I did that much in the game. I'm sorry, I didn't tie it all that much. But, I kind of got into this whole Bitcoin rant for you. Um, I'm thinking that anybody who's watching me play video games and talk about finance, probably younger. So I'm sorry if I get a little bit complex. Also, sorry if my voice trails and I get monotone. Um, but we'll get better, you know? Keep coming back if you like this. If you like this concept, if you want me to talk about any money things for future shows or any games you want to see me play. I can only play Game Pass games because I'm not spending any more money on games. That's ridiculous. I can't be a finance channel and spending money on games. It's nonsense. Anyways, I am happy you stuck around if you did. Please like and subscribe. Boom. And keep learning about money. Cheers.